The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website.
Hi everybody, welcome to Live and Learn. On this week's segment, we're going to be talking to Dean Settle, who's the author of this really cool book called Inside Nebraska Courthouses. You don't want to miss it, it's a great segment.
Hi everyone. Dr. Paul Johnsguard was a legend to everyone who loves the Sandhill Cranes. Joining us today is Linda Brown, one of the co-editors of the book, Remembering Paul Johnsguard. You'll want to stay tuned.
Hello, I'm Bill Ainsley. The topic today is fire safety with guest MJ Lierman of Lincoln Fire and Rescue.
Each year, the Nebraska Passport Program offers you an opportunity to visit unique places across Nebraska, including shops, tourist places, and historical sites. Stay tuned for an interesting discussion of what you can discover this year by visiting Nebraska through the Nebraska Passport Program.
This and more on today's Live and Learn.
Hi everybody, my name's Kim Hachiya. Welcome to Live and Learn. Once again, I very much like to thank our friends here at LNK TV and also at Aging Partners for professionally producing the show. It's really wonderful to work with people that really know what they're doing, and I enjoy that a lot. I'm excited today for today's interview because I really love the topic, but I also really am fascinated by my guest. He has reinvented himself so many times, which I think is cool. Dean Settle retired as an administrator for mental health services in Lancaster County, and then he operated an art gallery. And recently he published a book that's called Inside Nebraska Courthouses, and he wrote it with his late wife, Harriet Grossbart. Welcome to the show, Dean.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, we're so glad that you're here. You know, I really love this book because I am kind of a sucker for old buildings and historical things. So I was excited when I learned that you were doing the book. And so tell me how you got into the project.
Well, Harriet and I both, when you do a sum total on who our employers were throughout our careers, both worked for counties a lot. Harriet moved here from Florida in '72 and went to work immediately for Lancaster County. I was in and out of the county as a consultant and then finally was recruited by the county board in '89. So we ended up finishing our working lives for Lancaster County. But part of that I worked for the county in Iowa, and then I worked in Kansas. I also worked in California for a time as well. So we were involved with county government, and we knew how some of it operated, and we were in and out of courthouses. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of ordained that was a touchstone in putting this project together.
Well, I don't know, you guys would drive around Nebraska and visit courthouses.
We were both not from Nebraska, and so Nebraska was our adopted state. And so we learned the state by taking road trips on weekends. And you soon learn that road trips on weekends are limited because places like courthouses are locked on Saturdays and Sundays and also on holidays. So we made this pact that whenever we both had time off during the work week, we would go back and walk through the inside of the courthouses. Another driver was that if you search or Google courthouses, all you get is the exterior. And maybe who the architect is, and maybe where the stone came from. So this piqued our interest, I think, even more about what's inside the building. And then I was somewhat interested in and had done a lot of reading on architectural elements. And so it all kind of fell into place once we both could go out on trips Monday through Friday.
Well, and I know you said that you've told me in the past that some of the courthouses have a lot more security issues than others, and so you got to be friends with the county clerk at pretty much every courthouse in Nebraska.
I worked and kept the Nebraska Association of County Officials informed. Very, very helpful throughout that whole venture. Candace Meredith, the associate director at NACO, really was a great help, and she's the one that said don't do anything in the county courthouse without informing the county clerk.
Mm-hmm. Or the janitor.
Well, that soon happened because often the clerk would hand me over to the maintenance guy, who often was the historian and was keeper of many secrets, like where the good stuff was stored. And so it all began to work. We also learned quickly that courthouses have a work schedule of their own. They're front loaded, so Monday through Wednesday, sometimes even up to Thursday, things are busy, lots of meetings, county commissioners are in and out, and courts in session. So then we soon figured out if we would visit during the end of the week, often I could just do a self-guided tour, and that's what we did. I used my phone. I have several other cameras, but the phone is what I used to take photos, and I took 6,000 photos. It took 11 months to get those all done.
Yeah.
In all 93 courthouses.
Right. Which is just an astonishing idea that you went to all 93 counties. I think that's very cool. And some, when you look through the book, some of these courthouses are quite grand, and they're from the
19th century.
Yeah, 19th century or early 20th centuries, quite grand, quite elaborate. And then some of them, like we were talking earlier about the Loop County Courthouse, looks like a bonanza. And some of them, there's one that was looks like a little almost soddy kind of a building in the Sand Hills.
In the Sand Hills.
Yeah, and how when courthouses in the early 19th and 20th century,
well, some of our county seats are not even incorporated.
Right.
Like Stockville, Frontier
Right.
County. It's still an unincorporated village. However, when I got there, you drove by the house that Frank Morrison lived in when he was county attorney. Who knew? I certainly did not know
You
that.
learned a lot about Nebraska by
And the
driving.
Van Pelt family all came from Stockville.
Right, right. So what are some of the, I know you told me that you don't have a favorite, but if somebody was going to replicate this, which courthouses would you say this is a must-see?
Well, my attorney friends are always interested in the courtrooms. And recently the library at the law school bought copies of the book, so that will be available to their students. But I would say courtroom excitement for me was very close. Beatrice, Gage County, has probably two of the very, very finest courtrooms in the state. They're done with dark mahogany wood. They're painted very, very well, and they're huge. They're like 30 feet high, and the windows are similarly very high. Excellent experience to visit both a county courtroom and a district courtroom. I was fortunate enough, one of the judges actually conducted those tours, and I went back a couple of times to take better photos.
Well, in some of the courthouses, I would imagine were the sites of some pretty important trials. And so, that would be interesting to see that. Or maybe they've served as the Hollywood site for those trials.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Another favorite courtroom of mine is Fall City, Richardson County, and that was the trial for Big Girls Don't Cry, the movie, and it's a beautiful courtroom on the 4th floor of that courthouse, built in 22, I believe, and Art Deco, so it's a barrel roof, and the accent colors are turquoise and pink.
That's
1920s,
yeah.
That's probably appropriate. And then behind the judge's bench is a big, huge, beautiful oil painting. And then at the foot of the courtroom, another matching oil painting about early times and pioneer days, that sort of thing.
Well, and you also said that you discovered some sort of the unsavory things that happened in Nebraska, like the Klan and all the lynchings.
As we toured, people just talk, or I don't know that I initiated questions so much, Kim, but I listened and took notes. Legally, we have only executed 38 people in Nebraska legally, but we have lynched 57 that we have records of. Probably we don't have records for Native Americans or even maybe for some blacks who lived in the southeast corner of the state. But 57 people were lynched. So the populace didn't want to wait for a trial. They thought it was expensive to hold them, or they thought the judge wasn't doing his job at that point. So there were vigilantes. There was a large group west of Lincoln called the Regulators, who would kind of take over, break into the jail, or a key was given to them to come get the the person and they were hung.
Wow.
And somewhat difficult in the early days of Nebraska because we didn't have mature trees. So they would hang them from bridges or they would hang them from poles.
Wow.
So, you know, it was interesting to listen. Probably the most hair-tingling example was a horse thief or cattle thief, don't remember which now, in Thomas County, which would be Thedford is the county seat. The Cowboys got drunk one Friday night. They knew that the thief had been arrested, was being held in jail, very flimsy jail at that point because it was a very new county seat. So they broke into the jail and they took the gentleman out to hang. No rope, nobody brought a rope. So they hung him with barbed wire.
Ooh, that is particularly cruel.
Now, it's not in writing. It was told to me
It's just a story.
as a story by county officials in Thomas County.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty amazing. So one of the things you also enjoyed doing was taking pictures of the art that you found inside these buildings. You just mentioned
Initially, I
paintings
thought
and
one of the drivers, just because of my lifelong interest in art, and Harriet was a lifelong collector of art as well. But I thought, you know, if we get into these buildings, there'll be paintings, there'll be prints, there'll be maps, there'll be, you know, old ballots framed. I would say not so much. Taxpayer money really isn't spent for art. And so you soon begin to pick that up. So my concern about taking photos of art in the courthouses kind of waned, and I ended up taking more and more photos of architectural elements. The tile around the old fireplaces, for example. Cass County, Plattsmouth had 24 fireplaces. And then around those fireboxes, beautiful, beautiful English glazed tile.
yeah. Well, and I know there's pictures of newel posts and interesting wood chairs.
That may be my next book, the newel post landings. And there are no two alike. They're all individual statements.
Yeah, yeah. It is. Also, you know, you looked at tiles on the floor in terrazzo and all sorts of different things. So I mean, just kind of stuff that caught your eye and.
Well, we had some real craftsmen who had carved, you know, newel posts, banisters. There were some very, very fine pieces of woodwork as examples.
Yeah, I like you have this thing they think are called kickshaws, your little doodads from Shakespeare.
As we went through the courthouses, people would start to share all kinds of things, and they were kind of unrelated material, so we never knew what we were going to pick up, like places to go or scandals, or in Mullen, in Hooker County, county treasurer committed suicide in his vault over the weekend. I never got to.
You did find some very strange.
I never got to why. I should go back and pull the newspaper during that time.
That's weird. So you self-published this.
I did.
And so how can people get a copy of the book if they want it?
We have about 30 places here in the eastern part of the state. Bookstores, obviously, gift shops. In the Haymarket, there are several places. From Nebraska, that store, antique stores, because people are of the same demographic, 55 and up, who go antiquing, but also would really appreciate some memories in this book. So antique stores, and then bookstores, obviously. Francie and Finch here in downtown Lincoln has sold over 100. West of here, good sales of the book. In Seward, Chapters is a bookstore right on the north side of the courthouse square.
Yeah.
And then I have a bookseller in Hastings, another bookseller in Grand Island.
Right, and I know you have a website, so we'll put that up on the screen.
And there are like 4 or 5 places you can pick up the book in Omaha as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, this is great. I love this book, mainly just like I said, because I'm a sucker for historical things, and so it's really beautiful. And unfortunately, we are out of time. And you and I could talk for 2 hours on this, and we have in the past. And so thank you for coming and talking about your book and how it is a memorial to Harriet, and I appreciate that too. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And I'd like to welcome or remind our viewers that it's never too late to live and learn.
I was doing some shopping and got a pop-up on my laptop. Computer had a virus. So I called the number on the page, and the guy on the phone wants to take control of my screen to sort it out. Then I remember a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Control my screen. This is a tech support scam. Thankfully, my order still went through.
Recognize fraud sooner so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Hello, I'm Bill Ainsley, your host for this segment of Live and Learn. Today we're going to be talking about fire prevention, fire safety, how to prevent fires, what to do if there is a fire, and the personnel and equipment involved in putting out the fires and maybe saving lives. With me today is MJ Lierman, Public Relations Officer with Lincoln Fire and Rescue. MJ, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
MJ, what happens when someone calls in to 911?
Well, when we get the call, we're ready to go. Lincoln Fire prides ourselves on always being ready. We want to make sure, depending on which call comes in, depends on our great dispatch team. So they get the first call, they alert us whether it's a fire or an emergency, a medical emergency. There will be different responses based on which type of call we have. So we're either sending out an engine and a medic unit to a medical call. That's why you might get an engine showing up at your house when you think you've called for a ambulance. But we send out both. It's because of our crews. The way we operate, all Lincoln Fire and Rescue personnel are EMTs. So everyone is trained to be able to respond on a medical emergency. Now, if it's a fire, there's a lot of different responses that we can make, but most of the time we're sending out 2 trucks, 3 engines, our battalion chief, a medic unit. It's considered our full response. So we have the whole cavalry coming if it is a confirmed fire.
Well, I know we have fires caused by children playing with matches and people smoking and electrical fires. So what are the most common types of fires in Lincoln?
So the most common types of fires in Lincoln and across the nation are fires that involve cooking, whether it is grilling or in your home on the stoves, whether it's a gas or electrical grill. Cooking is very number one fires that we see. So cooking safety is really important, and educating people on those tips to keep safe while cooking is important to us. The main thing is be present while you're cooking. Do not leave anything unattended. If you are planning on warming or cooking with grease, make sure you have something there, a pan lid or something, in order to try to smother that grease pan fire. Those are probably the most common on the stovetop. Try to be able to smother it. Don't hit it with water. That will spread the fire. But we want to make sure that, you know, if you can try to take that oxygen away, do so. But if worst case scenario, just get out of the home and call 911. And we would much rather have you safely outside waiting for us. We can be there really quickly.
What about pets and so forth?
Pets can create some issues. We've had a couple calls where the pets will jump up on a stove that is a gas stove and turn those knobs. So there's safety knobs that you can buy and make sure that, you know, if that's a problem in your home. Otherwise, with candles and things, those are another in-home thing. Any open flame can cause you know, a fire. So if you have a lot of clutter, some pets can jump around and move things where, you know, something you might not think about it being able to start a fire, but those pets can also cause a couple problems like that too. So it's best to keep them contained when you're not at home.
I know that smoking is not nearly as much in style as it used to be, but what about smoking problems with fires?
We do have some smoking problems. It's usually with the improperly disposing of the smoking materials, ashes and things like that. We have this time of year vegetation outside and things like that it's really dry. It's been dry for quite a while, so if someone throws out a cigarette butt or something like that, that can cause a really big problem on these especially dry, windy days. So we want to make sure that you are always really cautious about disposing those smoking materials properly, especially if you're living in a outdoor, if you're on a deck. Don't dispose of them in like a plant. Dry plant soil is not an ashtray. So use of a appropriate ashtray type thing is really important. And just be, we stress neighborhoods and things that apartment buildings are one of those things that you may not be doing, you may not even smoke, but it's dangerous because there are people around there. So be cognizant of the people around you and your neighbors.
How effective are these smokers' poles that I see outside some doors?
Usually they're very, they're designed to be appropriately a safe way to dispose of those. So those are good as long as people use them. You don't want to ever throw trash. If you're not a smoker, don't ever throw trash and things into those, because sometimes people throw wrappers or trash thinking that that's a good idea, but then when someone throws a cigarette butt or something in there and there's extra combustible material, it gets to be a problem.
We see these TV shows about folks who have their house full of stuff that they have accumulated over the years. Sometimes there's barely a path that you can just walk through if you know how to navigate it. What can be done about hoarders?
Well, it is a problem, and so if you or have a loved one or anything that might have their house in that state, we really consider using the proper channels to help them maybe dispose of some of that, because it's unsafe for our firefighters. It makes the pathways and the exit areas to get a person in and out of there, it's just much more difficult. And all of the things that are in there are very, very combustible. So if a fire does start, it can be a problem because the house will go up significantly quicker and be more dangerous in trying to get, like I said, the normal pathways and normal room structures do not match up. So those are kind of problem areas sometimes.
So if you don't have relatives that are willing to clean out your house, what can you do?
Well, there are resources, I guess, to do that. We don't do that necessarily, but I'm not sure, there might be some ways to look into that as far as getting some help.
So the fire starts. What should be done to increase the chances that the alarms will sound, giving the folks at home a chance to save their lives and get the heck out of Dodge, so to speak?
So the most important thing is to have smoke alarms in your house. A lot of people surprisingly don't, but what we, Lincoln Fire, we use these 10-year lithium smoke alarms. Basically, they're good for 10 years, so you don't ever have to worry about the battery, replacing the battery. A lot of different types, a lot of smoke alarms in people's houses are hardwired, so they have a battery backup. We suggest changing that battery at least once a year. That's when we do the spring forward or the fallback. When you change your clocks, change your batteries. It's to prevent those little chirps, those little annoying chirps that happen when your battery is low. So in order to avoid that, if you are replacing your smoke alarms and things, you can use these 10-year lithium batteries, because you put them up once and you test them. The important thing is to always test them also once a month, so that you make sure they are working.
You can take it out of the box and show people.
I can. So like I said, the key is, one aspect of this is having a smoke alarm in your home, and also a carbon monoxide detector. You want to also make sure that you check them, so that even if you've been changing the batteries, or like I said, they're hardwired, you kind of take them for granted a lot of times, but there might be a malfunction. When the power goes out is when usually a lot of people notice that the battery backups start beeping because they've had to be used, and if you haven't changed them in a while, then that's your signal to change them. So these, we suggest you have them in at least every floor of your home. You want to make sure you have them outside of every sleeping area. Have them near the kitchen. You want to make sure they're not right above the stove so that they're not going off all the time when you are cooking. But you want to have them in the area so that holidays and things, people get busy in the house, and that's the one important thing. You might forget you have something going on the stove, or any time of the year really, but those smoke alarms give you that early detection of there's smoke in the air way before the fire gets out of control. So you want to have these in your home and make sure they're working.
The alarms are going off, so they are working, and the people are awake, but they're not safe yet because they're still inside the burning building.
Yes. So this is where your exit plans in your homes or facilities, things like that, are really, really important. If you hear the alarms going off at any time, you want to always make sure that you start getting to where you're going out of the building and getting to your designated meeting spot. Having a plan prior to an emergency is really important so that everyone knows where to go, what to do if the alarms go off, and in case of an emergency, and also so that everyone has that same meeting spot and we can account for them before we get there, hopefully. We always like to say that everyone evacuated safely prior to our arrival. And if not, then we will know that so-and-so is missing and this is where we need to look for them. So that's a really important thing, is to go over your smoke, your exit plans, and have a plan.
When someone calls for LFR, what are the training levels of the people that are coming?
All of our firefighters are EMTs. That means they are emergency medical technicians. We have basic that everyone is, and then there's also paramedics who are advanced life saving. So about half of our department can function in a higher level, but we like to say that everything can be handled primarily. First off, airway, breathing, and circulation are your basic life-saving skills. So everyone coming has their EMT, whether they're coming in a fire truck or the medic unit, or the engine or the truck. Every Lincoln Fire and Rescue employee is an EMT.
So you've talked about the kind of vehicle just now. So how is the decision made about what to send where?
Well, fortunately, that is our dispatchers. They are really, really good at assessing what, and going through our protocols as to who they send. But I went through the responses before. We will send a fire response has a response of the engines, the trucks, the battalion chief, a medic unit, our air rig, and then on a medical, we have the engines will go. That's because there's 16 stations from around town. So we have 16 frontline engines. We have 8 frontline medic units. So sometimes an engine may make it to your house quicker than the medic unit does.
Well, MJ, I want to thank you for being on the program today and giving us much valuable information about fire safety.
Thank you for having me.
Here's how to contact MJ and get more information about fire safety. It's MJ Lierman, Public Information Officer, Lincoln Fire and Rescue, MLIERMAN at lincoln.ne.gov, 402-326-1348. Thanks again for being on the program today. Remember, folks, when talking about fire safety, it is never too late to live and learn.
My kid has been asking for this hot new gaming thing, and I was like, okay, he had a birthday coming up anyway. So I finally find the video game online, in stock. Thing is, it was from this shoddy website full of typos. The That's when I remembered a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Bogus website, this is a shopping scam. Got us matching t-shirts instead.
Recognize fraud sooner,
He loves his.
so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Masters and welcome to Live and Learn. It is a great honor and privilege to have with us today Linda Brown. Linda was a dear friend of the late Dr. Paul Johnsguard. She, along with Joseph Kren, are the co-editors of an amazing book, Remembering Paul Johnsguard. That's what we've been talking about today. So with that said, welcome, Linda.
Well, thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, we're delighted to have you here. Thank you so much. Linda, before we get into this wonderful book, do you think you could tell our viewers a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Okay. Well, I was a hospital pharmacist for 30 years at Bryan Hospital. Always a science nerd. I love science. And when I was young, my parents were birders, so my dad would always name the birds that we were hearing, so I learned to bird by ear. My mom would try to get me to see a bird, and she would almost point my head, and I could never see him. Finally, when I was 9, I got glasses. I could see the leaves on the trees and those birds she was telling me about. And Paul had the same situation. He didn't get glasses till he was 9. And then he could see the birds too.
Isn't that extraordinary? You know, that shared issue in terms of vision. So, I think it's interesting that Paul, when I had the opportunity to meet him on campus, he would always talk about that he needed to get to the downtown senior center for the noon meal, and he loved it. What do you think made Paul so memorable and just really had such an impression on people? So from your vantage point, what do you think?
Well, I like to think of him in terms of the Bob Hall cartoon. He was tall, he was lanky, he moved really fast, kind of quick like a crane. He often had his binoculars. I love the Bob Hall cartoon. I think it's captured him perfectly.
It really has. He, one time I heard him give a lecture at Crane Trust, and he just said it with such genuineness. He said, people think I look like a crane. and when you looked at him, you thought, as a matter of fact, right?
And you talk about hearing him speak. He had such a depth of knowledge, and people would ask him questions, and he'd pull it right out. It was just amazing how he could perform on the moment.
He really could, couldn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And when he was writing a book, he could recall references that most academics would have to labor to find, and he would just be able to pull it. It was extraordinary. Linda, I'm curious because you said that, really you come by birding naturally in terms of your own development. And how did you come to appreciate his love of birds and especially those dear sandhill cranes?
Well, I was lucky. I met Paul Johnsguard at the Unitarian Church in the 70s, and he was offering guided bird walks as a church auction fundraiser. So I bought one for my mom for Mother's Day, and Paul took us out to Pioneers Park. We saw, it was mid-May, passerine migration, the peak. We saw 55 species, including a scarlet tanager.
My.
And then in 1989, I signed up for his ornithology class. One of the best things was going out to Grand Island to see the sandhill crane migration. He took a busload of us. It was a small busload, like 15.
Sure.
And in the evening, he took us to Tom Mangelson's cabin on the Platte River. And we got out of the bus. We had our sack lunches, so we were prepared to go sit on the bank of the river. It was a very nice night. And I think it must have been late March, or it wouldn't have been so nice. And we just marveled at watching the cranes soaring overhead and the sound.
Oh.
I mean, you've heard them, right?
Oh, it takes your breath away.
Yes. So that's why I knew he really appreciated the cranes. He shared them with us that night.
You know, there was a sweatshirt that they sold at some of the shops in the area, and it was a quote from Paul, "Cranes are the stuff of magic."
Ah.
Isn't that the truth?
And he believed it.
He really did.
He wrote extensively about the amazing sandhill crane migration that we have on the Platte River. I mean, like 500,000. I've seen reports, I think George Archibald would say up to 1 million cranes use a 100-mile swath of the Platte River going from Grand Island west. They all funnel in on their migratory routes to feed and linger along the Platte for about 6 weeks. They go out and feed, fatten up, go into the river to roost at night for safety, and then go on to their nesting grounds. Up in Canada, the graders go up to Minnesota. So we're really important. We don't hunt the cranes.
That's right.
Everybody else hunts
the only
the
state,
cranes.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very important.
Well, there's such beautiful creatures, and Paul's ability to write about them was so extraordinary. But I would also say, speaking of extraordinary, is the book that you and Joseph Krenn put together. Can you talk a little bit about the book, why you compiled all these stories, and then for our viewers, maybe hit on some of the highlights?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, Joseph Krenn was one of Paul's favorite, I'm going to say one of his favorite graduate students. He came from the Czech Republic in the early 90s to work on his PhD and became Paul's graduate student. He can't be with us this morning because he's teaching nursing students science at the Bryan Hospital Healthcare Sciences College. But he and I, of course, became good friends because of Paul. And after Paul died, we both were thinking about the fact that Paul had written 105 books, many about birds, other aspects of nature. He'd written a bit about his family, but never about his friends. And yet he'd had rich friendships with a lot of people. And so Joseph said, "Linda, we've got to do it." Sort of like, I had a lot to do, but. So we sent out letters to 80 people, and 40 of his friends stepped up to the task. And it is a task. You stepped up. And we were really fortunate after we compiled all of this. And at first, we realized between the two of us, we had enough pictures to do the whole book.
Right.
So we didn't even have to ask anybody else, although we did get one amazing picture from Mike Forsberg. Anyway, we were really lucky. We went to Paul's publisher at Digital Commons, Paul Royster. It was in January, and we went to his house, and we laid out all the materials. We had it in a book. It was very organized. And I had sent it ahead, so Paul had seen the digital files. And he said, and we started the pitch, and he said, "I'm going to do it." I mean, there was no question. He had published many, many, many of Paul's books, the new ones, and Paul had redone several to bring them up to date. Always, he would go to Paul Royster at Digital Commons. The University of Nebraska's Digital Commons makes all of these works free. And so Paul Johnsguard would just revel in the fact that people were downloading his writings from all over the world. Anyway, I want to talk about a few people that wrote in the book. And the first one is Tom May. Well, first of all, I want to show you a picture of Joseph Krenn as he's looking at fine art with Paul. Paul invited him to get involved in spending money on fine art. And then the next one is In the Blind, Tom Mangelson, Paul Johnsguard, and Joseph Krenn. And the In the Blind happened a lot with Tom Michelson. That was the beginning of his relationship with Paul. And they spent hours and hours and hours together photographing ducks, geese, and swans. It was a wonderful, wonderful relationship. The next slide that I want to show you is of Mike Forsberg. And Paul was always so pleased with the work that Mike Forsberg was doing. Mike was photographing cranes here on the Platte, and very recently put out a book on his journey. He actually followed the whooping cranes from the Platte River on their migratory route all the way up to Wood Buffalo in Canada. And wonderful photographs, and of course Mike's pronouncements. I gave it to my grandkids for Christmas. And Mike had some words that I want to share about Paul. He said, Paul did not just know plants and animals and places that he studied and wrote about. He loved them. And that love oozed out of him with a brightness and passion and from the very core of his being. That's vintage Mike Forsberg's writing.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes.
That is beautiful.
Yes. Let's talk about because Paul would want us to talk about cranes. He would say to anyone who asked him, what should I do to go see the cranes? He'd say, by all means go, no matter how much time you have. Go drive around the fields. Go. He would say, I want you to look at their behavior. Watch when they dance in the fields. Watch as they feed. Watch the family groups move together. And he would invite people to go to the Crane Trust Nature Center just west of Grand Island and Audubon's Row Sanctuary near Cardi. Both centers are amazing for helping us understand what's going on with this amazing crane migration.
You know, I briefly want to mention going with Paul to either one of those centers and people would see him. It was like he was a rock star. And they would just, you're Paul Johnsguard. And he was so humble about it. And he was so happy to talk to people about the cranes. It just really is a testament to what a good soul he was.
I agree.
Absolutely. So, Linda, in the final 30 seconds, a question that I ask everybody. What gives you hope?
Well, I'm a science nerd, and I know the world is warming, and it will be different for future generations. But I have hope that people are resourceful enough that they will still be able to find meaning in their lives in this harsher climate that's coming.
Well, I think that idea of meaning is so important, and one of the best ways to find meaning in your life is to make a trip to see the sandhill cranes.
Well said.
Oh, well, Linda, thank you so very much for being part of our program today and sharing your stories, and also to you and Joseph for this beautiful book. We remain grateful.
You are welcome.
Thank you. And to our viewers, remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
So, I'm playing with the dog, and I get this robocall from the Social Security Administration saying my card had been suspended and I had to call them back immediately. And that's when I remembered a tip from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Random robocall? This is a Social Security scam.
Recognize fraud sooner,
Robots.
so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Welcome to Live and Learn. Each year, the Nebraska Passport Program identifies unique places you can visit across Nebraska, including shops and cafes and other historical places. I'm Doug Jose, and joining me today is Madison Johnson, who's the coordinator of the Nebraska Passport Program. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First, before we get into the Passport Program, let's talk about sort of the basic publication for Nebraska tourism, and that's the Nebraska Travel Guide. How does this come about? It's a really nice magazine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really great to flip through. So if you want to get your hands on one, you can go to any of the rest areas in the state or any sort of county or city travel center, or you can go on our website, which is the Visit Nebraska website, and request one, or you can call our office. But our travel guide features lots of different cool places to visit, so especially for folks who are totally unfamiliar with Nebraska. So maybe you have family that don't live in the state and you want them to get to know Nebraska. This is a very great way to kind of get to know you, introduce the basics of Nebraska travel, and then every year we highlight different places on it that allow for a really fun and interactive experience.
Well, the Passport program is your specific program. That's your bailiwick, so to speak. And tell us how you select these places that are in the Passport.
Yeah, so the Passport is 70 different destinations across the state, and then every year they're selected from an application pool. So this last summer, or for this summer, I got about 300 applications. So we go through and we read the applications, we kind of look for new places, some places maybe we haven't highlighted in a while, or a handful of different factors that allow us to choose a really dynamic and interesting program for everyone who can participate. And it's a bit of a beast to handle, but it's fun too.
Well, we should mention that this is last year's Passport,
yes.
But the new one is coming off the press soon. So.
Yes, this is last year's book, which I will miss because it's pink and pretty and I like it, but this year's will be really wonderful as well. But yeah, that's last year's booklet. So if you don't know what the Passport is, it's kind of an actual physical booklet. It's about 52 pages long. You can flip through, there's photos, addresses, descriptions, all sorts of things you need to travel. So it's a really great way to kind of have a physical, a lot of folks really love being able to flip through it and enjoy the booklet itself.
How long has this program been going? Quite a while, I think.
Yes, so this is actually going to be our 16th year. So last year we celebrated 15 years of the Nebraska Passport, and so this year's number 16. So I always say the Passport can drive now. How exciting.
Which leads me to the next question. Do you repeat places from maybe previous years, or is it every year new?
Every year is new, so we do have about a 3 to 4 year wait list before a stop can be chosen again. So there are places that maybe if you've been doing the Passport for 5 years, you might be going back to a few destinations that you're familiar with, but we really try to make sure it's new every year. I think this year we only have a handful of stops that have been on the Passport before, so this is a really new and fresh year, which we're excited about. But there are going to be some old classics on there of places maybe you've been a handful of times that we're always excited to go back to, at least I am.
And you mentioned there are 70 locations in the book?
Yes.
And do you have prizes, I believe, for people that complete the whole book or maybe part of the book?
Yeah, so there are 4 different prize levels for folks who go to different stops. So there are 10 stops, 25, 50, and all 70. So the 10 stop prize is obviously the smallest, and then it gets cumulative. So if you go to all 70 stops in 2025, you'll get an example. I'm wearing the t-shirt from last year. So this is our t-shirt that the Passport champions went and got. It has a handful of different locations on it, which is fun. And then there's also things like our Visit Nebraska calendar. There are lottery tickets, scratch tickets you can get coupons for that Nebraska Lottery donates to us. There's also fun things like we've done luggage tags in the past, travel mugs, things like that. So it's the prizes always change, but they're always kind of fun and always just an added bonus, I always say. The prizes are not the reason you should do the program, but they are a nice little cherry on top for sure.
And you ask people if they will to submit some stories of their experiences and maybe some pictures. And what do you do with, are those built into your program somehow?
Yes, so well, we love to see the stories shared on our website that folks do. We also have a Facebook page that people can post stuff on of their travels, maybe some information. If you need up-to-date travel information, our Facebook group is a great way to get that. It's Nebraska Passport Pals. It has about 2,500 members, so it's pretty big and great. It's a really lovely community on Facebook. But then our stories that we like to share, we love to use those for testimonies for the Passport of folks, as an example of reasons of why you should do the program. There's a lot of kind of intergenerational stories that are shared of, I know there's one woman who her daughter and granddaughter live in the UK, and they come to Nebraska every year and they do the Passport together. So it's, a lot of those stories of people who've done it for years and years really are heartwarming and make my job really fun. So we love to hear all of the feedback we get.
And talking about that, I'm kind of curious how many people actually complete the whole. I mean, that's 70. That's a lot of stops across the state.
Yes, it is, and it's the passport only runs through the summertime, so it's May 1st through September 30th. So it's about 5 months worth of travel. But this last year we had 1,083 people go to all 70 of the destinations. So that is a number that stayed steady. Yeah, it's great. That's a number that stayed steady for the last handful of years. Is about 1,000 people go to all 70, which we love because that's a really wonderful testament to not only the participants who do the program, but the quality of the stops and kind of how the program's been successful.
And what is the feedback you get from the people who have the stops and stamp the books?
Oh, you mean the destinations
yeah,
that are on it?
Yeah, do they have stories to tell too, like you mentioned?
Absolutely, yeah. I get, so many people who are so unbelievably thankful to be on the program, and it's, we have, every year we have a stop that's kind of chosen as our fan favorite destination, which is a process voted on by folks who go to all 70. So you only get a vote if you go to all 70, so it's a little bit more fair. But the place that won this last summer was Adeline's Bakery in Burr, Nebraska. It's a really small bakery in, it's almost like a she shed, if you know what that is. So it's a shed behind their house. And it's this beautiful little bakery that has a really wonderful story behind it. It's named after, I believe, her grandmother. And it, the owner of it, Amy, was so thankful to be on the program. And she had talked about how she just, I think the average stop last year got about 3,500 visitors through their door from the Passport, and that's statewide, not just the eastern part of the state where a majority of the folks live. So 3,500 people can be a lot for a destination that's in the middle of the country, or really a place that's really unknown, or new businesses starting out. So it can have a ton of benefit. Another one that comes to mind is Branched Oak Observatory. Have you ever been there?
No, I haven't.
Did you know that there's an observatory by Branched Oak?
Yes, I know there's one there, but I haven't visited yet.
Yeah, they said that this last summer when they were on the program that they had, I think it was something like they had about 15,000 visitors, not from the Passport themselves, but because of the publicity of the Passport, it allowed so many more people to know about them and get to get mouth-to-mouth marketing that allows people to be excited to go visit it, and just kind of the things of when you leave a destination you really love, you call up your sister or your friend and you say, oh my gosh, you have to go there. So those kinds of things can be really invaluable to different destinations.
Yeah, you mentioned Burr, which is in southeast Nebraska, so it's a little bit out of the way to get there too.
Yeah. And then I love making people who live in Lincoln drive to Scottsbluff and vice versa. So that's my favorite.
Do you have other, over the past few years, are there other really favorite places?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, there's so many great places that become really hidden gems. I mean, a few that people love, so this actually t-shirt that I'm wearing, last year for 15 years, we did a celebration of the 15 kind of fan favorites from the last 15 years of the Passport. So those are places that have always kind of stood out to folks and were kind of voted as fan favorites. So a few of those are like Robbers Cave here in Lincoln.
Okay.
There's a tour that you can take of Robbers Cave that's really wonderful. The tour guide is so knowledgeable. As well as a few museums that I really love. The Craigle Windmill Factory Museum in Nebraska City. It's a old windmill factory. It's incredible.
I have been there.
It's so special. So that was a Passport stop last year. That was one of our fan favorites. And then as well as, like the really big classic heavy hitters like Scottsbluff National Monument, Smith Falls, a handful of those bigger ones that are really beautiful, and I think every Nebraskan should go to at least once.
One of the things that you have this year is also a scavenger hunt. Now, how is that different than going through the Passport book?
Yeah, so our scavenger hunt through the travel guide is similar, but a little bit different. So the travel guide scavenger hunt, it takes you to the 7 different regions in the state, and then you can collect stickers to put in the back of the travel guide. So it is a fun, the stickers are all unique for each area. So I know the one for southeast Nebraska is in Nebraska City, and you go to Arbor Day Farm and you get a sticker that has a little apple tree on it. Or you can go to the Omaha Visitor Center, the Norfolk Visitor Center, I think Gearing, Scottsbluff, North Platte, Kearney, those things. So it's a little bit separate, but just a fun thing to do that you can also do at the Passport if you're traveling to all these areas anyway.
Do you spend a lot of your time traveling around the state to identify these places? That must be a fun job you have.
Yes, it's very fun. I've been in my job for a little over 6 years, and every summer I go out and I visit destinations, and I've gone to at least 50 every year. So I get to do what people do for vacation for my job, which is a really, really fun thing. But I love to get out and about and meet the business owners and hear their feedback and things that can be improved with the program, and ways that, maybe they have experienced some pushback or whatever it might be. It's really important for me to be out in the communities and learn from them. And then as well, I love to meet passporters who are out, because I sometimes don't introduce myself as the coordinator. I maybe ask oh, what are, how many stops have you been to? And then maybe
it's like a hidden camera
yeah,
sort of thing.
I get kind of sneaky about it, because I want to hear genuine feedback. I don't want people to sugarcoat stuff to me. So it's really fun.
When you're setting up these places, do you have a sort of a ratio of, say, shops versus cafes versus other tourist spots that you try to aim for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have I kind of, the thing I like to do is I like to balance it by region. So I don't want there to be 4 museums in Omaha, because that can be a bit of a long day for some folks. So we want to make sure there's restaurants in each region, maybe a store, a museum, state park, something to stretch your legs, something like that. So I try to make sure there's a good balance, and it's really fun. And the year, since it changes every year, there allows for so much flexibility there. And each year we get to highlight something a little bit unique.
Just to review before we close, tell us where people can get a passport book.
Yes, so the passport booklets can be gotten on our website. You can request them for free. So the passport is completely free to do. That is important for me to note. So you can go to our website, nebraskapassport.com, and request them to be mailed to you. Or come May 1st, when the program begins, you can go to any of the 70 destinations and you can pick up a passport booklet there. We also have a passport app that can be downloaded on your phone. It's a free app, it's completely free, but you just have to go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, and you can download it there too. And that's fun. So if you're really, really anxious to get out and go and you don't want to wait for your booklet to arrive in the mail, you can download our app too.
Madison, thanks a lot for reviewing the passport program for us, and thanks for your enthusiasm for this program, and we hope people, it's a good summer for people to get out and see the state.
Absolutely.
So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Remember, it's never too late to live and learn about the unique places across Nebraska.